It is a normal night in the Oryudong neighborhood except for the cries of a baby held up by a mysterious creature while his mother begs for help. But the policemen who tried to protect them already lie defeated on the ground, and with no one left to intervene, the baby's fate seems decided. The beast moves to strike when a man suddenly passes by, cutting off its hand in one motion and turning back with a blank stare. The creature freezes in surprise, then grows red with anger, while the man simply shakes the blood from his hand. It throws the baby aside and charges, the mother catching her child as the monster slams its fist down. Yet the man slips away with ease and answers with a kick that sends the beast crashing through a building. The creature bursts out from the rubble and leaps forward, jaws wide to swallow him whole, but he kicks its jaw upward and follows with a flurry of punches, striking again and again until the beast is driven backward, and the red glow fades from its body as it collapses lifeless. The crowd stands silent before realizing what happened, and then they begin to cheer, while the man just turns to leave. The mother rushes forward to thank him with tears in her eyes, but he gives her only a blank look before vanishing in a blur of speed, leaping into the air and bounding from rooftop to rooftop. This masked man is no ordinary person. He is a superhuman. He is Whitecap. At Seoyan High, a teacher drones on while Lim Kang sleeps at his desk, until the loudspeakers suddenly blast a disaster alert from the Inhumans warning system. Students scramble to evacuate, but Kang stays slumped over until his phone rings. It's Jory, urging him to get moving and telling him about an incident at Incheon Port. He checks for his earpiece and the small pieces of his disguise, then glances around the empty classroom before slipping out toward the bathroom, reminding himself to stay as inconspicuous as possible. At the Incheon Port, a truck driver makes a desperate attempt to run down the Inhuman, but the monster doesn't even flinch as the vehicle crumples on impact, and with a single punch it kills the driver while flattening the truck in one blow. Two workers hide behind a container, one sobbing that they are already doomed while the other urges him to stay quiet and wait for the military, but in the next instant the creature has already found them. Meanwhile, Kang suits up in the school bathroom, and once he is ready, he climbs out through a window and leaps from the building, racing through the city streets at the speed of a plane before crossing vast stretches of forest. Guided by Jury's live coordinates through his earpiece, he heads straight for the port. The Inhuman shows no mercy to the workers, driving one straight into a container with a single punch before grabbing another by the head and smashing him against the steel. When it notices a third man trying to run, it instantly leaps after him, seizes him by the head, and flings him into a container with crushing force. But before the beast can finish him, the foreman intervenes, shouting and hurling a wrench in desperation, even as his body trembles with fear. And for a fleeting moment, he thinks of his wife and child, realizing this might be the end for him. The Inhuman pauses to stare at him, its gaze cold and unreadable. Then without a word, it turns and begins to walk away, only to suddenly grab a nearby container and hurl it toward him, leaving the foreman frozen in place as his doom flies closer and closer. That is when Kang finally arrives, kicking the massive container aside in the last instant and giving the foreman the shock of his life as Kang shoots past and skids to a halt. The Inhuman fixes its gaze on him, but Kang only remarks flatly that throwing things around like that is dangerous. Jory, watching through the camera in Kang's cap, urges him to try speaking with the creature in case it reveals anything. So Kang asks the Inhuman if it can understand him, and for a moment it almost seems to form words before its body suddenly flares crimson and it lunges forward, trying to pummel him into the ground and forcing Kang to leap back. But the beast instantly whips around and slaps him midair into a container with bone-shaking force. Yet Kang shrugs it off, kicking off the steel, and landing back on the ground while noting grimly that this one is faster than usual. Above them, a helicopter circles as a reporter captures the action live, announcing the sudden appearance of the superhuman Whitecap and pointing out the arrival of the Inhuman Subjugation Special Task Force, the ISSTF. On the ground, the captain orders his squad to hold position, admitting that their weapons are useless against an Inhuman and that if the superhuman falls, there is nothing they can do, though he adds that they have a plan B ready. The Inhuman charges again as Kang turns to run, but its fist is already swinging for his head. He barely manages to spring upward, planting a foot against the container behind him before diving downward, but the creature shoots out its tongue, striking him midair and knocking him off balance. In that moment it seizes his leg and slams him into the ground, the impact ricocheting his body across the concrete and crashing him into a nearby container. Sensing that White Cap may have been taken out, the military decides to intervene, and the commander calls for Plan B. A truck swings open to reveal a cyborg sniper known simply as B. Without hesitation, he raises his massive rifle, and a .50 caliber round tears through the Inhuman's skull, sending the beast flying across the port. But it isn't over. The monster drags itself up, its body glowing red as the headshot only seems to enrage it further. B reloads and fires again and again, each round smashing into the creature's frame without slowing it down, and though he empties the magazine faster with every squeeze of the trigger, the Inhuman only seems to harden against the barrage, glaring through the storm of bullets unfazed. B grits his teeth, cocking his weapon and steadying himself for another desperate shot. That's when both of them hear the rumble of a container nearby. Metal groans and shifts, and from the dark hole torn into its side, Kang slowly steps out into the open, brushing himself off and quietly grateful that the steel had held firm and kept him from being hurled into the sea. Jory exhales in relief and tells him to finish the Inhuman since it can't even speak, and Kang agrees it seems that way before deciding it's time to get serious. He taps his foot once, almost like he's just warming up, then kicks off, and in the blink of an eye he vanishes, reappearing above the monster in the same instant. Before it can react, he crashes down with a brutal kick that caves its head in. Then, without pausing, he drives his hand into the Inhuman's mouth, lifting it by the jaw before hurling it back down with superhuman force. His aura flaring as he smashes it headfirst into the earth. The impact explodes outward in a shockwave that rattles the entire port, containers groaning as the ground itself shakes. When the dust clears, he lets go of the motionless beast, leaving everyone present open-mouthed with shock. Even Jory, who has already witnessed his power before, is stunned. The reporter above even mistakes the tremor for an earthquake. But then the Inhuman twitches, its skull half crushed, and staggers upright on its hands, refusing to die. For a heartbeat, it looks as though the fight will continue, but its strength finally gives out and the body collapses for good. Jory, sweating bullets, asks if it is truly over, and Kang nods calmly, saying he felt its brain explode, and that if by chance it rises again, he will simply pummel it back into the ground. He adds that this one wasn't as strong as the beast they faced previously on Anmayan Island. From the rooftops above, a man watches with interest, noting that live battles are far more exhilarating than recordings, and though White Cap is as merciless as rumored, he feels the hero is still holding back his true strength. He turns to the woman beside him, Danyang, asking if she feels the same, but she remains silent, and with a smirk, he leaps down to greet their little hero in person. Kang senses him instantly and turns to him, demanding to know who he is, but the man only remarks that his glare is rather frightening for someone who's supposed to be a hero. Jory wonders where this stranger even came from, while Kang quickly points out that he is not alone, that there is another presence watching from above. The man approaches without hostility, saying he enjoyed the fight and found it flashy and explosive, like the star of a popular superhero TV show, Ketchup Man. At the mention of his favorite character, Kang actually blushes, clearly pleased with the compliment, until Jory yells at him through the earpiece to get it together and demand the stranger's identity. Kang tries, but his words come out garbled, and the man only laughs at his lack of social skills, though behind the smile there is an unmistakable sense of danger. The stranger explains that he has kept a close eye on Kang for some time, watching him through television, social media, and live streams, noting how he appears within minutes whenever an Inhuman surfaces. However, he's not here for Kang today, and watching the fight was simply a bonus. He assures Kang he won't do anything to him. Kang narrows his eyes and asks why he should believe a word of it, which catches the stranger by surprise. Jory reminds Kang of his past in Samcheok City, when two men in suits acted friendly before tasing him. For all they know, this man could be another military agent or government operative, and it would be best to just leave now. The stranger, however, insists he will go only after sharing something interesting. He asks Kang what the world calls him, and when Kang answers a superhuman, the man smiles and reveals that he too is one, and not only him. Across the world there are many others, people who defy all logic, beings stronger than anyone could possibly imagine. Kang tells the man that he doesn't care whether he is a superhuman or not, but he should stop following him. The stranger replies that he still has more to say, yet Kang simply turns and walks away, hungry from the fight and thinking more about food than conversation. The man chuckles at the dismissal, then casually remarks that if Kang won't listen here, he will just finish the conversation at his school, since that would be easier. That makes Kang stop in his tracks, and when the man asks if he isn't a student without the mask, both Kang and Juri are left stunned. The stranger notices their silence and promises to keep the secret between them, but adds that the pink-haired guy in Kang's earpiece shouldn't worry, because he already knows he isn't ordinary. He praises Juri for creating the resistant mask and the miniature camera, calling him someone with enormous potential, even admitting that he had to resist the urge to kidnap him more than once. He adds that he might even pay him a visit, while Whitecap is at school. Juri goes pale as he realizes this man has uncovered everything about their identities, but the stranger only mocks Kang's stunned expression, asking if he might have gone overboard with the joke. Kang's face hardens, and he asks if the stranger really said he was a superhuman, because if that's the case, then he doesn't need to hold back. His aura shifts with intensity as he declares that Juri is the only one he considers family, and he will never allow anyone to get near him. The man's demeanor changes as well, his own presence flaring, though he insists once more that he is not Kang's enemy, and that they should continue speaking without hostility. But Kang is done listening. His killing intent surges as he springs forward, and Kang drives a punch straight at the stranger, but the man calmly raises both palms to meet it. The blow crashes against him with a thunderous crack, yet the strike is stopped cold, completely blocked without the man even budging. Kang grows angrier, and pulling back his fist, he lashes out with a backhand. But the strike meets nothing as the stranger vanishes in an instant, only to reappear a moment later, landing lightly on Kang's arm as though mocking his speed. He observes Kang's restraint and remarks that he must be one of those tsundere types, pretending he wants to kill yet clearly pulling his punches. Dropping to the ground, he tells Kang that if he truly wishes to fight, then there is no point in holding back, because showing mercy in a street fight is nothing but foolishness. He reminds him again that he is also a superhuman, and warns that if Kang doesn't want to die, he had better fight with all his strength. Once they begin, he says, this entire place will be destroyed, because that is simply the nature of battles between superhumans. Juri urges Kang to calm down, admitting that the man isn't wrong. There is nothing to gain here, and even though it bothers him that their identities have been exposed, fighting a superhuman they know nothing about would be reckless. Better to leave with as little injury as possible, than seek more answers later. Seeing Kang's aura ease, the stranger nods in satisfaction, and says it is good that he understands. He will take his leave for now, but they will meet again. Before he goes, Kang asks for his name, and gives his own, Lim Kang. The man smiles, and replies in kind, his name is Nangi. Danyang drops down beside him, and offers to treat his arm, which makes it clear the punch had left more of an effect than Nangi is letting on, since his arms are already red and trembling. Nangi only laughs and brushes it off, insisting that they are not that bad. In the next instant, the pair turn and vanish, leaving Kang standing alone, speechless. As he prepares to depart, the surviving workers approach, thanking him sincerely and admitting they would have been dead without his intervention. Their foreman insists he should treat him to pork belly as thanks, but Kang politely refuses, offering only a quiet word of appreciation before blasting into the air and leaving a crater in his wake. On TV, the latest episode of Ketchup Man plays, showing the hero gripping one of Sherlock's goons by the throat. When the man refuses to talk, mostly because he can't talk at all, Ketchup Man mistakes the silence for unshakable loyalty and hurls the poor goon straight down, crashing into a building below. Showing no mercy, he dives after the goon and finishes him with his signature move, the devastating ketchup smash, splattering the ground and leaving the villain coughing blood. Declaring that this was not even a fraction of his power, he warns Sherlock that as long as he lives, no one will threaten the planet. The citizens cheer, reporters praise him as Earth's hope, and once again the world is reminded that Ketchup Man is humanity's greatest hero. When the episode fades to an end, Kang sighs miserably, wishing he didn't have to wait another week. Juri wakes up, groaning at how obsessed he is, especially after fighting an Inhuman the night before only to wake up early for a superhero premiere. Kang insists it was worth it and immediately tries to spoil the plot until Jory shuts him up on the spot. As Kang keeps pestering him about what Nangi might have meant when he compared him to Ketchup Man, Jory ignores him, already used to this routine. But then he remembers school isn't cancelled today, and he'd forgot to tell him. In an instant, Kang bolts out the door, leaving behind a complete mess of a room that Jory now has to clean. At Seoyeon High, a teacher explains that Inhumans are not humans at all, but creatures with unreal strength and speed, driven by an instinct to kill. It's impossible to imagine how terrifying they are unless you've faced one directly. The United Nations recently reported 37 recorded appearances in the past 5 years, causing over 500 deaths worldwide. Including the recent incident at Incheon Port, there have been 7 cases in Korea alone, and Whitecap has been involved in resolving 5 of them. Yet despite countless theories and rumors, nothing has been confirmed. No one knows where the Inhumans came from, or why they exist. And if Inhumans remain a mystery, then so do the superhumans who fight them. No one knows why only a handful of people awaken such powers, or what ties them, if any, to the monsters they face. Kang is drooling at his desk as usual, but hearing this lecture, the entire class has also fallen asleep. Somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a small fishing boat rocks gently against the waves. The captain notices a stuffed penguin doll sitting beside his deckhand and laughs, asking why a grown man would bring a toy onto the boat. The younger man smiles and explains that today is his daughter Ruby's birthday. The captain asks why he didn't buy his princess something prettier, like a real doll. But the deckhand insists that Ruby's dream is to one day travel to Antarctica and see the penguins with her own eyes, so this gift would mean more to her than anything else. After lunch, he plans to go straight home to celebrate, though he admits nervously that he worries she might forget his face since he spends so much of his life at sea. The captain chuckles at the thought, asking if she really said that, and the younger man confirms proudly, saying she can already talk about all sorts of things. The captain agrees that children grow too quickly, time flying by before a father even realizes it, and he admits with some regret that he never gave his own daughter a proper gift. The younger man encourages him that it is never too late, but the captain only laughs and says she is far too old for that now. He waves at the penguin doll instead, warning it will stink if it gets wet and telling him to bring it inside. But the deckhand shakes his head and says it will be fine as long as the plastic stays on. Besides, he adds, he cannot be late, or his daughter will never forgive him for breaking their promise. That is when the captain hears it, a heavy splash echoing from the dark waters beside them, and as he peers over the railing, he sees a massive shadow rising steadily from below. The surface breaks, and in an instant, a huge blue hand bursts upward and slams down with bone-crushing force, flattening the captain where he stands. The deckhand stumbles out in shock, only to find himself staring at a hulking, lizard-like Inhuman standing on the captain's mangled remains. He bolts for the radio, shouting an emergency call, but before he can give their coordinates, the creature is upon him, seizing his head in its claws and smashing his face into the deck. Dangling helplessly in its grasp, he chokes out a final plea for someone to save him, and as the light fades from his eyes, the broken radio crackles with static, carrying his dying words out across the waves. 10 nautical miles away on the luxury cruise liner SS Opera, passengers lounge beneath the sun, drinking and laughing without a care, oblivious to the nightmare drifting toward them. On the bridge, the captain receives the fractured SOS, cut off almost as soon as it began, but enough to know something terrible has happened. His navigators tell him the vessel is close, barely 25 minutes away if they change course, and without hesitation he orders the opera to divert, for no sailor could ignore such a call for help. Back at the fishing boat, the deck is slick with blood, the bodies of the 2 men crumpled beside the penguin doll, and standing among the carnage is the Inhuman, its form already shifting into the likeness of the fallen deckhand as it turns its gaze toward the approaching luxury liner. Far away in Washington, the United States Secretary of Defense and his assistant James await 2 figures whose names are whispered like legends, St. Pearl and Galen Withrow. When they arrive, James tells them this is the worst-case scenario. The SS Opera, carrying 3,000 people, has been invaded by an Inhuman in the middle of the ocean and is moving toward land. Pearl tells James to brief them on the way, and the two superhumans leave immediately. The Secretary of Defense heaves a sigh of relief. Their very presence is overwhelming. So these are the superhumans. Elsewhere in an abandoned building, Danyang warns Nangi that the media has gone wild since his clash with Whitecap, and now both of them carry bounties on their heads. Nangi only laughs, asking if they should just go and find out what crime they supposedly committed, but Danyang frowns, reminding him they hadn't come here to play around. Nangi shrugs it off, saying there's a reason he allowed themselves to appear on the news, though he'll explain later. For now, the chaos ahead is too entertaining to ignore, and he muses that the world is only worth playing in if both sides stay balanced. On the rooftop, the helicopter is already waiting. The trio board quickly, and the rotors lift them into the night. James reports that they are 500 miles away, and it will take 2 hours to reach the opera. They don't know the extent of the damage on board, but because it is an Inhuman, the government had no choice but to request their help. 5 squadrons of military forces had already been deployed by submarine, but within 20 minutes of arrival all contact was lost. The forces likely annihilated. Because the ship is currently on autopilot, if it drifts too close to Florida, F-40 fighter jets armed with nuclear missiles already have clearance to strike it down to prevent the Inhuman from reaching land. And yet, no one knows what is truly happening aboard the ship. As James begins to panic, Pearl calls his name and tells him firmly that she is here now. The sky grows dark and stormy as the helicopter approaches the ship. 1,000 feet above the opera, Pearl asks for the door to be opened, leaving James stunned. He quickly hands them earpieces so they can stay in contact. And as Pearl prepares to jump, she turns back briefly to tell James to call off the nukes, since she's here now. Then, without hesitation, Pearl and Withrow leap from the roaring helicopter as they had done many times before, plunging toward the cruise liner below. Little did they know, this time would be different. They land hard on the helipad and looking up, they find the decks already littered with bodies. Pearl mutters that the reports were true. An Inhuman is here. From the bridge, something looks at her, heavy and unblinking. And in that moment, she has been marked. James's voice crackles faintly over the comms, explaining that the opera is vast, each level a maze of corridors and rooms, and it may be difficult to locate the Inhuman. If they split up, they could cover more ground faster, but one of them may be forced into a one-on-one fight, which would be far more dangerous. Still, with so many lives at stake, they have no choice. Withrow volunteers to sweep the upper decks while Pearl heads for the lower levels, and they agree to regroup if either encounters the creature. Pearl vaults over the edge of the ship and plunges down the side, slamming her fist into the steel hull to slow her descent until she finds a window near the cargo hold. Deciding she is at the right height, she kicks off and swings her legs forward, smashing straight through the hull with a thunderous crash that sends steel bending inward as she bursts into the lower deck. She lands in the storage deck, where there is nothing but cargo stacked high. As she searches the lower decks, she finds no survivors, but no bodies either, so she presses on deeper into the ship. Meanwhile, Withrow enters the upper decks where every corridor he searches is littered with bodies, and when he tells James it feels like looking at hell, James notes that the Inhuman almost seems to be hiding itself. That's when their comms begin to break up, and James wonders if it could be the strange effects of the Bermuda Triangle. As Withrow moves deeper into the dim halls, he finds a man slumped on the floor mumbling incoherently about his wife being a monster. And while Withrow reaches for his earpiece to report the survivor, there is only static. He is left wondering if the man has simply lost his mind from fear. In the lower decks, Pearl has also lost contact with both of them, and when someone calls her name, she turns to see a little girl step out from hiding, asking softly if Pearl has come to save them. Back upstairs, Withrow eventually makes his way to the event hall, where the stench of blood is overwhelming, and though he curses his useless earpiece, his attention is caught by the sight of Pearl standing in the hallway and calls out to her in surprise. Hearing his voice, she slowly turns to face him as he asks how she got up here so quickly, but instead of replying, she lets out a guttural growl, and in the next instant she lunges with a monstrous jaw. Withrow manages to dodge back, but not without harm. His right arm has been torn off in an instant, and as the creature leaps again trying to swallow him whole, he dives aside and retreats into the shadows, his blood trailing behind. Hiding behind a pillar, he curses himself for being careless, knowing that any slower and his head would have been gone. It wasn't an illusion. He really did see Pearl. So was it a mimic? Even with his guard down, how could something carry that much power? Before he can think further, the creature tears through the pillar, nearly taking his head as its disguise begins to melt away. The Inhuman charges, but Withrow plants his foot and delivers a savage kick that hurls it into the far wall. Yet even after crashing through the rubble, it does not stay down, and as it rises to its feet, the last of its disguise falls away, revealing its true form, an Inhuman. Withrow is forced to get serious. Tearing off his cloak and wrapping the bleeding stump of his arm, he growls at the creature to give his arm back. The beast lunges again. Meanwhile, in the lower decks, the little girl happily leads Pearl into a section of the cargo hold, where dozens of survivors, young and old, are huddled together. They explain that there are more survivors scattered across the lower levels, and Pearl knows she has to hurry. They know it is a lot to ask, but they beg her to save everyone. Back in the event hall, the vicious fight rages on, both moving at inhuman speeds. The beast leaps with a strike, but Withrow blocks it with his one arm. Another claw lashes in from the side, only for him to stop it with his leg, locking the two of them in a deadly clinch. For a moment, Withrow seems cornered as the jaws stretch wide toward his head, but he suddenly springs upward and drives a knee into its face, sending the beast tumbling across the floor. Analyzing its movements, he realizes the creature cannot shift forms in the middle of battle, which means its ability does not pose a threat for now. Even so, he knows he has to end this quickly. His aura flares, halting the beast for a moment, and as he glances around he notices barrels of beer stacked in the corner. Without hesitation, he smashes one open with a kick, sending liquid spraying toward his enemy. In mid-air, the liquid crystallizes into countless shards that bombard the creature's body in a ceaseless barrage. Seizing the opening, Withrow grabs a nearby wine bottle and smashes off the bottom. As the liquid flows out to the floor, it freezes into a gleaming blade enveloping around his hand. It has been a long day, and he is no longer in the mood to fool around. With the frozen blade formed around his arm, Withrow charges straight at the beast, and in that instant the scene shifts back to when Pearl and he first met in an interrogation room. Pearl could tell immediately that he was superhuman, able to withstand bullets and wipe out an entire street gang in a flash, but she wondered how he could also stop their bleeding in an instant. Withrow explains simply, freezing the coffee in her hand as an example. He can't explain it fully, but he can instantly harden liquids around him. Pearl asks if it is freezing, but Withrow says it is a little different, as the hardness is more comparable to diamonds. She admits she is impressed, saying that depending on the situation, his ability can create a weapon more powerful than most firearms. Back in the present, the blade bursts through the beast's face, and it grimaces on the floor in pain. But in the next moment, it punches Withrow from the side, catching him off guard and sending him crashing away. Panting heavily and clutching his side in pain, he notes that his stab missed because his balance was off. Before he can think further, the beast is already charging again, its body turning red. Withrow dashes aside as the creature crashes into the stairs behind him, but it immediately turns and gives chase, now fully glowing red. Even with half its head blown away, its speed has not slowed. Withrow's vision starts to blur, exhaustion and blood loss catching up with him, and his movements begin to slow. But as he steadies himself, he notices a sprinkler above. Leaping upward in desperation, he slams his foot into the ceiling, crushing the sprinkler under his heel, and water begins to spew across the hall, drenching the beast below. He activates his ability, and slowly the water begins to harden, freezing the monster in place as its movements grind to a halt. At the last moment, when it seemed his end was certain, the tables turn. In the interrogation room, Withrow had once explained to his soon-to-be team that his ability depends entirely on his mental fortitude. And now, as he stares at the creature locked in solid ice, he knows it will hold for at least an hour. It has been a long time since he struggled this much, and he wonders grimly how best to finish the frozen beast. But before he can act, something sharp brushes against his neck. His vision tilts, the world sliding sideways, and in the next instant, his head falls from his shoulders. With wide eyes frozen in disbelief, he realizes in his final moment that a second Inhuman has appeared behind him, something he never expected. And with Withrow's fall, the balance on the opera shifted. Pearl would soon face the storm alone. Aboard the helicopter, James is relieved to see Pearl and Withrow drawing closer to each other on the tracker. But in the next instant, Withrow's signal vanishes. At first, James is confused, but then the realization hits him. The earpieces are tied to their biometrics, and the only way for one to shut off is death. He frantically tries to re-establish the signal, refusing to believe it, but nothing comes back. On the opera, Pearl kicks in the door and bursts into the event hall. As light pours into the dimly lit hall, she sees two Inhumans, one still alive and another frozen solid. But her eyes go immediately to Withrow, his headless body lying on the ground. For a moment, she just stands there, simply at a loss of what to do. The sight pulls her back to the time they once spoke in a park. She had told him that even if people rarely showed it, everyone was thankful that he joined their team, herself included. James had always been happy about that too, though he had teased Withrow endlessly about wearing the ridiculous suit he always refused to put on. She had warned him then that Inhumans were unpredictable, appearing out of nowhere and throwing them into battles they could never anticipate. She hoped that if one of them fell, the other could stay rational, choose retreat if needed, and survive to keep protecting the world. Withrow had scoffed, saying she loved spouting meaningless things. If he ever faced an opponent she couldn't beat, he would escape too, because that would mean no one could win. He claimed he wasn't sentimental and wouldn't care if she died. But Pearl remembered the kindness he had shown a child who lost his balloon, and knew that wasn't true. Which is why now she is filled with grief and rage, and even as the Inhuman's body glows red, she charges in, throwing all caution to the wind and ignoring her own advice about rationality. Her fist crashes into its face, driving the head into the floor hard enough to crack it open. For a brief moment, she has time to turn back to Withrow. His severed head still stares forward with eyes wide open, and she kneels to close them out of respect. That is when the Inhuman leaps from behind, sinking its claws into her shoulders in a savage attempt to tear off her arm. The beast struggles to do so, but the blow only leaves a shallow cut, her skin too tough to break, and Pearl calmly finishes her business, closing Withrow's eyes. With that done, she rises, her aura flaring so fiercely that the beast recoils on instinct. But before it can retreat completely, she seizes one of its appendages and throws it with devastating force across the event hall, slamming it into the far wall with crushing impact. The torn limb still in her grip, she rips it in half and snarls that since she began this business of eradicating Inhumans, this has been the worst day of her job. And if it wants to act like a monster, then she will be like one too, telling it not to even imagine how it will die. But the creature refuses to yield. Clawing into the wall behind it, it braces its legs and with a howl launches forward, driving down in a stabbing strike. Pearl swats it aside with ease, then rises with a brutal uppercut that shatters its jaw and sends teeth flying. She follows with a straight punch to the face that hurls it sideways, and before it can hit the ground, she steps in with another blow that sends it crashing into a pillar at blinding speed. She wants to make this day a living hell for it, but decides it doesn't even deserve to be alive for a second longer. And as she glares at its crushed face, she commands it to get back up. Back in America, the president and his advisors argue over whether to launch a nuclear strike on the opera. Some demand immediate action with the ship only 90 minutes from land, while others insist Pearl and Withrow's last message proves they can still handle the situation. The debate spirals until the president silences them, declaring that he will cancel the order. He remembers when he first met Pearl, apologizing for appearing unannounced because he wanted to thank her for saving lives time after time. He said he was indebted to her, not for himself, but for the countless citizens whose lives she had protected. She simply told him then that no one could ever put a price on saving people, and that memory alone is enough for him to place his trust in her now. In a last desperate effort, the spider Inhuman spews a massive web from its stomach, and Pearl is fully covered in the sticky threads. But she only scowls in annoyance at the dying beast. Before she can tear through the web, the ice behind her stirs, Withrow's fading ability no longer holding. And from the shadows, the frozen lizard Inhuman has already slipped free of its prison, moving unnoticed until it lunges from behind and clamps its jaws onto her shoulder. She turns her head, and for an instant, she sees part of its face twisted into the likeness of Withrow. Rage floods her veins. She seizes the monster by the head and hurls it directly into the other Inhumans slumped against the pillar, realizing now why Withrow had been deceived. This was no ordinary beast, but a mutant. Her voice is steady as she tells them that Withrow was a foul-mouthed bastard with an unpleasant personality, so he probably won't be going to heaven. But when they meet him in hell, they had better beg for forgiveness. In that moment, her body blazes with light until it engulfs her completely. And with all her power focused into a single strike, she unleashes a punch that fractures the entire upper deck of the opera. The blinding light tearing a hole through steel and sending a beam of light shooting forward endlessly across the sea. The shockwave rattles the helicopter outside, and when the brilliance fades, Pearl stands before a gaping hole in the ship. The bodies of both Inhumans disintegrated to nothing. Outside, James rushes from the helicopter and sees Pearl emerge from the still glowing hole in the ship. When their eyes meet, she drops down to him and confirms Withrow's death. James wells up, then collapses to the ground, pounding his fists in grief, while even the pilot can only watch in quiet sorrow. News spreads quickly. The SS Opera incident is over, but Withrow has been confirmed dead. In the underground bunker, the president's staff celebrate the victory, yet the cheer vanishes the moment they hear of his passing. The president sits in silence, grateful the crisis ended but weighed down by the cost. Across the world, the broadcast plays. Kang slurps ramen while watching, barely listening until Jory shouts at him to stop eating all the food. But then they catch a report of a superhuman dying in battle, leaving Kang uncharacteristically focused on the screen. Elsewhere, Nangi and Danyang also watch the broadcast. Nangi remarks that even superhumans are still human, though he is sure Pearl never would have allowed someone to die if they had been fighting side by side. He recalls once crossing paths with her, admitting she sensed him instantly and spared him despite her anger. To Danyang, it proves that Pearl is both dangerously strong but also kinder than expected. Meanwhile in Florida, James privately calls his colleague Ben to deliver the worst news possible. Withrow's body has vanished and the funeral is cancelled, but the situation is growing more and more complicated. He warns Ben to keep it secret for now and sends him instructions to investigate. Both men hang up furious, seething at whoever dared to desecrate their friend's corpse. In Washington, the review of the SS Opera incident begins. So far, over 100 casualties are confirmed, mostly on the upper deck, though far fewer than expected thanks to military squads who drew the attention of the Inhumans away at the cost of their own lives, allowing civilians to escape. Pearl takes the floor to report her findings. The first beast she fought was spider-type, with webs and blade-like appendages, and she believes this was the one that killed Withrow after he exhausted himself fighting another Inhuman. That second one, she explains, was a chameleon-type shapeshifter that had even taken on Withrow's form when it attacked her. The room falls quiet. If Pearl is correct, then Withrow was ambushed while worn down, and his death came not from weakness, but from overwhelming numbers. James adds that this incident supports Ben's theory. Inhumans are hybrids of various living creatures, each with dangerous adaptations, but right now their biggest problem remains. Withrow's body has gone missing. Every other corpse was left untouched, yet his is gone. James rules out government involvement, since the disappearance was noticed before the ship even docked. Pearl concludes someone on board must have stolen it. Ben then confirms the opera carried a full CCTV system, and the recordings are being recovered. In a week, they should know who dared to take Withrow's body, and they vow to make him pay. On a flight bound for Korea, Matt Dion, better known as the flamboyant superhero Ketchup Man, sits in his seat uncomfortably, muttering about how the tight red pants are shifting up his cheeks. His manager Rose reminds him that the outfit was part of the contract and that the fans will be thrilled to see him step off the plane already in costume. And Dion eventually accepts it, grumbling but aware that his popularity depends on the people who adore him. With nothing else to do, he leans back and drifts off to sleep, saving his energy for the reception that awaits him. At Incheon Airport, where Ketchup Man is headed, a foot slams into the tarmac. An Inhuman stands there, gaze vacant and drool spilling from its mouth. It lets out a guttural roar that grows louder and louder, demanding to feed its hunger. The night before, Jory told Kang that Ketchup Man was coming to Korea, pointing out it wasn't every day you got to see his hero in person. Kang needed no convincing and immediately asked if they could get autographs. Jory grinned and pulled out his secret weapon, a Ketchup Man uniform, saying their chances of being noticed would skyrocket if they wore it. Kang's face lit up, calling him a genius. Now, at the arrivals halls, Kang and Juri wait eagerly for Ketchup Man. They start to wonder if they're even in the right place, since the crowd looks sparse. But before they can think further, alarms blare, and the loudspeakers announce an Inhuman sighting. Kang and Juri glance at each other, their expressions making it clear they already know what comes next. Outside on the runway, the Inhuman notices a plane descending for landing and charges toward it, enraged that another giant has entered its territory. Inside, Juri searches desperately for Kang's gear, but finds only a mask and an earpiece. Kang snatches them without a word and bolts off in a flash, cutting against the flow of the crowd rushing for the exits. Amid the chaos, he spots a man wearing a cap that resembles Whitecap's. Kang leaps toward him, darting past in an instant and snatching the hat before dashing into the bathroom. There, he glances at the Ketchup Man uniform in his hands, hesitating for just a second, then strips off his shirt, tears the logo from the cap, and pulls on the mask. With the cap now in place, his disguise is ready. Up in the sky above, the cabin speakers announce the landing, and while Matt is still fast asleep, Rose exhales in relief that they'll be touching down soon. In the cockpit, the pilot suddenly squints at the runway ahead, puzzled, before alerting his co-pilot that something is in their path. It's the Inhuman, barreling straight toward them. The beast breaks into a full sprint, building speed with long driving strides, then drops low and launches forward with such force that the runway cracks beneath its feet. It hurtles into the air, body stretched out as it closes the distance, before slamming into the plane's wing, claws raking across the metal. Landing heavily back on the runway, the Inhuman turns as the crippled aircraft struggles behind it, flames bursting from the wing as the plane plummets to the earth. Inside the cabin, passengers are thrown violently from their seats as Matt is jolted awake in shock. The pilot shouts for an emergency landing, pulling the nose of the plane up just in time as the wheels deploy. The aircraft slams down hard on the runway, grinding and scraping across the tarmac until it finally screeches to a halt. From a distance, the Inhuman watches the plane, which is now a sitting duck. Its gaze drifts to a nearby forklift, and it strides over, sinking its fingers into the metal frame. With a single hand, it lifts the machine before pulling it back over its shoulders. Meanwhile, the passengers clutch their injuries and groan in pain, and when one man glances out the window, his face goes pale before shouting that they need to escape now. The Inhuman hurls the forklift with immense force, sending it hurtling toward the downed aircraft. In that instant, Whitecap springs from the plane's roof, soaring into the air, and drives his leg upward into the incoming machine. The forklift is knocked off course and flung skyward as he lands back on the runway. The Inhuman stares at him blankly, and Whitecap meets its gaze in silence, the two squaring off as the wreckage crashes into the ground behind him. The Inhuman roars as the standoff begins, but Whitecap is already moving, gripping the forklift with one hand and hurling it back down the runway. The beast leaps high into the air to avoid it, only to be met mid-flight as Whitecap spins and drives a brutal backkick into its gut, black sludge bursting from its mouth before his hand pounds down on its skull, sending it plummeting downward and slamming into the ground hard enough to shatter the runway. Yet even as the dust clears, he frowns. The strike was solid, but the creature's body felt disturbingly soft, like striking clay. His earpiece buzzes then with Juri's voice, the boy inside the airport working to hack the tower cameras and patch him onto a live feed since he doesn't have his own. Kang opens his mouth to reply, but a fist crashes into his face, snapping his head back. But at the same time, he seizes the Inhuman's arm and whirls it straight into the ground, sending it ricocheting across the tarmac until it smashes into a pillar by the terminal. Kang dashes after it, but the beast gathers something in its mouth and spits out a volley of black sludge. Kang raises his arms to block, only for the creature to barrel through in a flash and drive a right hook into his face, staggering him sideways before following with a left. Another thunderous impact is heard. But this time Kang has caught the punch mid-swing and begins squeezing, his grip tightening until the Inhuman snarls in pain and springs back. It roars again, the sound shaking across the runway. In his ear, Juri informs him he's now on live broadcast, but Kang snaps back, demanding he go home since it's too dangerous. Juri refuses, insisting he won't leave Kang behind because they're a team. The Inhuman's roar builds into a scream, louder and louder, until its body suddenly heaves violently, and it launches a cluster of egg-like objects into the sky. Kang is stunned by the sight of hundreds of eggs filling the air before they come raining down across the airport, even landing near the damaged plane. One sphere crashes into the terminal and rolls to a stop at near Juri, leaving him staring in confusion. Elsewhere, James, Ben, and Pearl watch the broadcast, their expressions darkening as they take in the strange sight. Pearl frowns, as if questioning whether Whitecap can really handle this outbreak alone. The eggs begin to split, and from within, small Inhumans crawl out. Juri barely slips out of sight, but the vibration of his phone gives him away, and a hatchling immediately turns toward him. He grabs the phone and bolts, the creature launching after him in pursuit. Outside, the Inhuman's back twitches and bulges before tentacles burst out as its body glows red. Kang barely has time to register the change when Juri's panicked voice screams through the comms. Sensing Juri is in trouble, he takes his eye off the monster and bolts for the terminal, focused only on saving Juri above all else. A hatchling leaps at him, but he smashes through its head with a single punch, and in the next breath, hurls himself toward the terminal's shattered glass. But mid-air, the monster is already upon him, closing the distance before he can react. It raises both hands and slams him straight down into the ground, then follows with a crushing dive, driving into him again and blasting debris and shockwaves across the runway. Juri pants heavily, sweat running down his face as he hides from the hatchling. His smokescreen is already spent, and the thought hits him that he's out of options. Then he notices a woman crouched behind a pillar across from him, panic flooding his chest. What should he do? The hatchling roars, and the woman breaks, crying out in fear and drawing its attention. As the creature rounds the corner toward her, Juri hurls himself forward and smashes a fire extinguisher into its face, shouting for her to run. But the hatchling seizes his leg and slams him into the wall, knocking the wind out of him. He slides down helplessly, vision swimming, as the beast lumbers closer. Pinned and battered, Juri thinks of Kang, of how he has fought these monsters on his own time and time again, and wonders if that burden has been unbearably lonely. He hopes Kang can forgive him, because he can't help with that loneliness anymore, not when there's no escape for him now. But before the hatchling can tear into Juri, a knee smashes into its side and sends it crashing away. Juri looks up in disbelief to see B standing over him, calmly stating that he's here to support Whitecap. He recognizes him immediately. This was the sniper who had appeared during Kang's earlier battle. As the hatchling drags itself upright, B shrugs off his sleeve and reveals his bionic hand. Gripping it with his other arm, he remembers what the scientist had told him before the operation. The weapon built into him is called the Kesser Rail, engineered for devastating output far beyond conventional arms, but its flaw lies in the immense energy needed to fire it. B had once seen a prototype and assumed it would never work, until the scientist explained they now had a solution. The Natom capsule, a breakthrough created by a young genius who shocked everyone by developing it the moment she joined. She had also designed the prosthetics B now wears, though the technology remains unstable, making him little more than a live test subject. To fire the rail, all he has to do is pull on his fingers. Each capsule will last 2 minutes, and he needs to keep track of that. Pulling them all at once, B activates the rail, then whistles for his companion, a bionic dog named C. The dog trots over with spare capsules strapped to its back, and in a practiced motion it leaps up as B snatches one without even looking. He slams the capsule into the port in his arm and roars as power floods his veins. The hatchling charges again, but B meets it point blank, unleashing a blast from the rail that hurls the creature back with overwhelming force. On the runway, more and more hatchlings tear into the steel hull of the fallen plane. Panic spreads inside, but Rose tries to rally the passengers, shouting for every able-bodied man to grab anything they can use and fight. One passenger snaps back, calling him insane for suggesting they battle creatures bullets can't even scratch, asking if he thinks this is one of his shows. A crash shakes the adjacent cabin, and a hatchling peers in from the corridor, sending the crowd into a frenzy as they shove and scramble to get away. B snatches another capsule as C darts past, reloading and firing a blast straight into the hatchling's head, knocking it back once again. But the creature rises, the wound in its eye regenerating. B presses the weapon directly to the same eye and fires, finally neutralizing the threat. The realization hits him. He has to strike the same spot twice, and this is not even an adult Inhuman. Switching to infrared vision, he sees two more closing in fast, and when C barks and shows him the remaining supply, there is only one capsule left. With his back against the wall, B knows this might be the end. The steel frame of the downed plane groans under repeated blows, metal bending until a hatchling bursts through, flung out with a hole torn through its stomach before crashing to the ground. From that gap, a figure steps out. Ketchup Man, demanding to know where the octopi's mother is hiding. Inside the cabin, panic surges again as another hatchling squeezes through, but Matt steps forward and lifts it casually by the head, scolding it for barging in without knocking while the passengers stare in disbelief, with the man who mocked him earlier now sweating bullets. Even as the creature hammers at him with blows, Rose pleads for an explanation, and Matt admits only a handful have ever known his secret, apologizing for the deception while confessing he was truly happy with the time they shared, though this will likely be the end of his acting career. Tears flood Rose's eyes as memories wash over him. Matt thanks him for everything, but in the next heartbeat, declares he is fired and blasts out of the plane with the hatchling in tow, singing his own theme song as he drives it into the ground. Still humming, he barely has time to savor the moment before another hatchling charges from behind, cutting him off mid-verse, and the interruption irritates him more than the threat. He whips around and clotheslines the beast, ripping its head clean off in one motion, then marches straight toward the looming adult Inhuman, the negligent parent behind it all, declaring that today will mark the extinction of every last octopus. Watching from the live broadcast, Pearl and the others are just as shaken, stunned, that Ketchup Man is a real superhuman. James blurts out if the man on screen is truly the actor Matt Dillon, and Ben confirms it is, leaving everyone questioning why he kept his identity hidden for so long. Even Pearl, who once crossed paths with him briefly, admits she never suspected a thing. Her confusion only deepening as she wonders who this man really is. Meanwhile, B fires the last shot from his Kessler rail, dropping another hatchling before collapsing to his knees, the weapon snapping from his arm under the strain. He prays it's the last of them, until the creature stirs again. Shouting for C, he grabs the bionic paw the hound obediently offers, pulling it free to reveal the dagger hidden inside, and in the same motion drives the blade into the hatchling's remaining eye. An appendage spears into his side as blood pours down, but he only grits his teeth and hacks the dagger down again and again until the thrashing stops and the beast lies still. His strength finally spent, he collapses with Jury beside him, the battlefield momentarily quiet. Back outside, the octopus Inhuman tilts its head at the new opponent, staring blankly before erupting in a roar, only for Matt to snarl back and promise it'll be drenched in ketchup today. He remembers the crash he heard earlier and realizes it must have been Whitecap's defeat, but brushes the thought aside and fixes his gaze on the beast, until rubble shifts nearby and Whitecap himself rises from the debris, startling both him and the Inhuman. As Kang stands, an unseen pressure rolls out from him, pressing down on them with crushing weight, cracking the floor beneath their feet as even the airport around them begins to tremble, the air distorting as space itself bends under the force. All eyes fall on Kang, and in that silence, one thing is certain. What awakens here will not be contained. Elsewhere, Danyang stares at Nangi in disbelief, demanding an explanation for what is happening on screen. But Nangi tells him it isn't any skill or he can sense. It's simply Whitecap's spirit overflowing, raw and uncontrolled. Even so, he notes how abnormal it is. Nothing like Kang's usual calm and detached style. More like the energy is spilling out against his will, as if he's moving unconsciously. Yet despite that, Nangi admits the sight is fascinating. Ketchup Man turning out to be an actual superhuman, and Whitecap once again surpassing every expectation. Danyang can only watch, unable to discern the Kang's intentions. The octopus Inhuman lunges, driving a massive punch toward Kang. But before the blow can land, its body is already covered in fist-shaped dents, blood spraying as Kang clamps a hand around its neck. Matt is the first to register what happened. In the split second the beast closed in, Kang had struck it 7 times across its body, the gap in their power now insurmountable. Yet even as Matt marvels, he senses something off, wondering if he's imagining the change in Kang, The Inhuman suddenly unravels, tentacles snapping around Kang to crush him, but the hold lasts only a heartbeat before he bursts free, shredding the limbs apart and dropping the monster to the ground. Kang moves to finish it when a voice cuts through the runway, halting him mid-step. Matt turns, and from the shadows emerges a monstrous figure, white-haired, draped in a regal cloak, commanding them to release the fallen Inhuman. Matt stares at the towering figure, stunned that an Inhuman is speaking at all, and worse, that he hadn't sensed its presence until now. The real question gnaws at him. Who or what is this creature? The white-haired Inhuman answers with words that drip like poison, noting their confusion, admitting that yes, he is inhuman. But why should that mean he cannot speak? Humans brand his kind as lesser, yet quake before them all the same, arrogant creatures, forever contradicting themselves. He raises a hand, and with a single gesture, the octopus Inhuman lifts helplessly from the ground and flies to his side, caught in his unseen grip. Continuing without pause, he sneers that humans are fools who only see what they wish to believe. And even the word inhuman itself was their invention, a label he now finds almost laughable. Danyang can't contain her shock. The Inhuman not only speaks, it's using an ability, and even wearing clothes. None of it makes sense. She turns to Nangi, who wears a rare frown, his confusion mirroring hers. The creature is certainly an Inhuman, yet everything about it unsettles him. He never imagined such a monster could exist. Its presence alone radiates power greater than countless ordinary Inhumans, a danger far beyond anything he could have prepared for. He always suspected beings of impossible strength might exist, but never that they would reveal themselves so openly, and there must be a reason for it. At last, he tells Danyang they may have to open the gate and act, because they cannot allow the other two to die here. Pressing the octopus Inhuman into the ground, the white-haired giant crouches low and asks if it remembers him. Watching from the side, Matt notes this creature is unlike anything humans have faced before, and easily 3 times their size. Whitehair demands the Inhuman speak, threatening to kill it if it stays silent. But the beast only growls back. He only scratches his head, frustrated that he was ordered not to kill when it's the only thing that feels natural. Finally, he jams a hand into its maw and rips out a pulsing red heart, declaring it will serve a better purpose. He tosses the corpse aside, unworthy of their war, and throws the heart to the Vanisher, who devours it in a single gulp. Looking back at the remains, he sneers at their stupidity and arrogance, vowing to correct them. That's when Kang charges in, but Matt blocks his path, warning him not to act recklessly. Kang ignores it and swings, the punch detonating in a shockwave that rocks the runway. When the dust clears, Matt is locked in a clinch with him, but the crushing pressure forces Matt to his knees. Snarling, his patience ends. Purple aura erupts around him as he rises back up, declaring he'll crush everything before him. The sudden flare pushes Kang back, and in that moment Matt realizes the man is unconscious, his body moving on instinct alone. Power surges through Matt's fist, violet light burning, and he smashes Kang across the face, sending him hurtling into the terminal, crashing through walls until he finally lies motionless on the roof. Matt admits he hasn't unleashed this much power in a long time, and now it's Whitehair's turn. The giant only scowls, telling him to try if he wants a swift death. But Matt charges anyway, purple energy concentrated in both fists. Whitehair mocks his recklessness and raises an arm. As his palm closes, a wall of earth and rubble towers around Matt before slamming in from both sides. Just as the walls crash in, a voice cuts through, calling his name. Pan. He knows it instantly as Morel's. Matt bursts from the rubble and drives forward again, but a magic seal flares at Pan's feet. The same moment Matt sees the seal, a colossal hand erupts from it, slicing past Matt in a flash. Pan looks back at Vanisher and gives the order to leave, the creature floating upward before ballooning wide and peeling open, its underside glowing with a portal alive with blue light and crackling arcs of electricity. Before stepping through, Pan spares a final look at Matt, admitting he had underestimated him. The strike had been meant to kill, yet only grazed his arm. No matter. The encounter was valuable, and next time, he vows, Matt's life will be his. With that, he leaps into the waiting gate. The Vanisher's underside yawns wide, the portal swallowing him whole as he vanishes into the dark void, a passage leading towards some unknown home. He bursts out the other side, high above the ocean, gravity seizing him once more as he plunges into the waves below. The sea swallows him, but the promise remains. The next time he surfaces, it will be for blood. News spreads fast. The airport restoration is underway, and by some miracle casualties were low thanks to the sudden appearance of 2 superhumans and the military's quick response. But the real shock is the reveal. Matt Dillon, the actor behind Ketchup Man, is a superhuman. Fans, investors, and his own agency reel from the news, unsure what this means for his career. At the hospital, B wakes to find his body shattered but alive, saved by crude first aid from the boy he'd rescued. At his side lies C, loyal to the end, sedated after standing guard for hours. The doctor reports dozens injured and 6 dead, 4 of them soldiers who fell against the hatchlings. B is moved but relieved. He and the boy both survived. Elsewhere, Yuri comes to, memories of the chaos still vivid. Kang is there to reassure him. They're safe, for now. He recounts his own lapse, rushing in to save Yuri, only to be caught off guard by the octopus Inhuman and stomped into the ground. The next thing he remembers is waking alone on the airport rooftop, the battle already over. In the corner, a TV blares breaking news. Matt's reveal as a superhuman has shocked the world, but so too has the appearance of unidentified Inhumans, unlike anything seen before. Experts warn they are a new kind, dangerous and unyielding, the same kind that began with Heptahorn 2 years ago. Fear spreads worldwide, but Kang notes one thing clearly. Whatever these creatures are, it was Ketchup Man who drove them back. At the same time in America, while government officials argue, Matt sits alone until Pearl steps in. She greets him after a long time, and he admits he didn't expect her. She doesn't bother asking why he hid his identity, and he says he wouldn't have answered anyway. Her only question, what will he do now? The room falls silent, everyone waiting. Matt answers plainly. He never felt guilt for hiding his power, never felt it was his duty to save anyone. As an actor and a man, he was satisfied with his life. Pearl realizes the man before her is nothing like the heroic image he built, and the disappointment is enough to make her turn to leave. But Matt stops her with a name, Withrow, adding that he is likely dead. Pearl bristles, demanding he explain. Matt reveals what few know. The white-haired Inhuman, Pan, spoke to him. This was no mindless beast, but a being with ego and intent, unlike anything he had ever fought. Pan left him with a warning, or rather a promise, that all superhumans will die soon. With Inhumans now appearing worldwide, their attacks may not be random but organized, and if that promise is true, Withrow won't be the only one. Pearl asks if he will still refuse to fight. Matt rises, saying he never refused, but he will fight alone. Ben steps in, insisting even a lone superhuman needs support, and calls someone in. The door opens, and Rose walks forward, his face firm, holding back words he clearly wants to say to Matt. Somewhere in Russia, 2 men trudge through heavy snow, following tracks that cut across the frozen wastes until they reach a towering cathedral. Basilov curses under his breath, furious that the beast dragged him across this frozen hell all day without a single break, while beside him, Kirillov eyes the doors suspiciously. Odd that they aren't smashed in, since Inhumans usually tear their way through. Basilov waves him off, saying they can ask the monster later, and shoves the wooden doors wide. Inside, the air hangs heavy. Kirillov frowns. He can't pinpoint the Inhuman's presence. Instead, it feels scattered through the building, wrong and disjointed. Basilov brushes him aside, telling him to stick close. Kirillov laughs, teasing him for being afraid, but Basilov growls back that he isn't afraid for himself. He's worried about him. They step into the sanctuary. Rows of pews stretch into the shadows, and figures sit slumped in silence. For a moment they look like people, until one slowly turns its head. Skin gray, eyes vacant, a corpse's face. It hisses and bolts straight at them. Kirillov leaps aside, noting it's faster than a normal human but far too slow for an Inhuman. Basilov doesn't move. He grips the charging corpse mid-stride and lifts it into the air, already reading its clumsy aim for his throat. Another corpse lunges from the flank. and Basilov slams the first into it, sending both flying across the sanctuary, smashing into the far wall. Kirillov shouts for him to wait, insisting they might still be human, but Basilov cuts him off. "Don't be a fool. These things are dead, and something made them this way." As more corpses shuffle from the shadows, filling the sanctuary with hisses and snarls, Basilov sets his stance and growls for Kirillov not to hesitate. They'll send every last one of them to heaven. The last corpse crashes to the ground, and Basilov grits his teeth. He hates fights like this, but at least they've flushed out the culprit. At the far end of the sanctuary, a figure dangles from the ceiling, bat-shaped, its outline clear against the shadows. An Inhuman. Basilov calls out, telling it to stop dangling up there and crawl down, or he'll climb up and drag it down himself. At the provocation, the creature drops silently to the floor, landing in a crouch and staring at them without a trace of fear. Kirillov studies it carefully. Smaller in build than even Basilov, yet its form is uncanny. Sharp ears, wings folded around its body like a shroud, a living bat or some twisted Dracula. He remembers the bite marks on the victims, which must have turned them to ghouls. Basilov cautions him the same. One bite might turn him into a vampire, and it may be irreversible. He'll handle this fight alone, and Kirillov should stay back. Then he bursts forward in a blur of speed. Just as Basilov's fist is about to connect, the Inhuman vaults upward, snaring his punch with clawed legs and kicking off, flipping high into the air. Its wings snap open as it glides, then folds into a perfect landing on the pulpit. Kirillov's eyes widen. Its agility is unlike anything he's seen, and it remains calm, not the raging frenzy of a normal Inhuman. This is something different. The creature begins to shift, wings tearing from its back and crawling along its frame until they attach to its arms. Kirillov feels the surge instantly, a fighting spirit so sharp it burns in the air. Before he can finish his thought, the Inhuman speaks, its voice echoing through the sanctuary. Ophir, it says, was a favored warrior of Lord Pan, and they had killed him. Both superhumans freeze, the name sparking the question if it was one of the creatures they fought before. Then the vampire's aura erupts, flaring like fire, and it unleashes a scream so piercing the walls quake, forcing Basilov and Kirillov to clap hands over their ears. Suddenly the Inhuman vanishes, reappearing with a vicious punch to Basilov's gut that lifts him off his feet. Basilov scowls, seizing the bat by the head and slamming a fist into its face, but the creature doesn't flinch. It only glares back with burning eyes before driving an uppercut into Basilov's jaw, then yanking his head down and smashing a knee into his skull. Basilov staggers, blood spraying from his mouth, and another crushing punch hurls him across the sanctuary, shattering a pillar. The bat strides after him, taunting that they must not have been the ones who killed Ophir after all. But it doesn't matter, he says. Soon every one of them will die, whether by his hand or another's. Even as it speaks, Kirillov is already tracing shapes with his fingers. The bat lunges, jaws opening to bite into Basilov's throat, but a sudden flash of light spears through the air, slicing across its shoulders. The creature jerks back, clutching its bleeding wound, and whirls to face him. Kirillov exhales in frustration, muttering that he'd aimed for its head, and declares that from here on, he'll be the one to fight it. The vampire snarls that Kirillov's power is strange, that he hadn't sensed a thing until the strike was already on him. As it speaks, Kirillov watches in disbelief as the gaping wound in its shoulder begins to knit itself back together, new flesh crawling across the tear. Regeneration? He clenches his jaw, shrugs off his cloak, and declares that the animal he hates most is bats. So this one, he'll kill. The creature lunges at him, and in the same instant Kirillov leaps back, fingers slicing the air in practiced motions. As the bat closes in, he drops his hand. A flash erupts, shaping into a colossal sword that screams down toward his foe. The Inhuman twists, spinning out of the way at the last heartbeat, but not unscathed. The blade had grazed its head, drawing blood. Kirillov doesn't pause. His fingers cut another arc, and as his hand falls, a giant axe materializes overhead, its bright edge plummeting like a falling star. The vampire can only watch as the blade crashes into the floor along with him, the impact tearing stone and shattering the earth beneath. When the dust settles, the vampire is still standing. It commends Kirillov for being stronger than expected. Kirillov, astonished by its speed, notes it evaded his strike by a hair, though at the cost of an arm. Yet even now the torn shoulder is fully healed. The creature adds that it has killed a superhuman before, but never one as strong as him. In the next second, it vanishes. A leg swings for Kirillov's head, but he ducks back and flips away, only for the Inhuman to already be charging. Kirillov's fingers carve through the air and his palm snaps upward, and a massive shield materializes before him. The vampire slams into it, the strike rebounding with a crack that leaves the beast itself momentarily confused. In the past, Basilov once asked how Kirillov had managed to cleave an Inhuman in half. Kirillov explained his power. He paints on the air with his fingers, materializing whatever weapon he imagines, allowing him to strike from a distance. The axe Basilov saw was one such creation, too fast for the eye to follow. Basilov was impressed, but pressed for a weakness. Kirillov admitted there was one. Each use drains his sight. And though he hasn't gone blind yet, the risk grows with every battle. The shield holds the vampire back as Kirillov braces it with one hand and traces with the other. He swings a palm through the air, and a spiked ball on a chain materializes, whipping down and hammering the creature. The impact blasts it across the sanctuary, stone exploding as it smashes through a pillar and crumples against the far wall. The conjured weapons crumble to dust, leaving Kirillov panting. Too tough, he thinks, forcing his fingers to move again. But blood streams from his eyes, his vision blurring. When the dust clears, the vampire is gone. It reappears behind him in a blur, claws chopping down, cleaving his body in half. The torso slumps, head about to be crushed beneath its heel. Then the corpse dissolves into ash. The Inhuman freezes in shock, just as Kirillov's real form stands above on the second floor. Longbow drawn, silver string taut, blood tears spilling from his eyes, he looses an arrow that expands mid-flight into a spear. The shot rips through the vampire's back, bursting out its chest in a spray of blood. It coughs violently, staggering, but Kirillov doesn't let up. He leaps down, sprinting forward even as darkness consumes his sight. He's never forced his ability this far before. The vampire grips the spear buried in its chest and tears it free with a roar, gore spilling across the stone. Kirillov halts, vision collapsing to black. He remembers Basilov once asking why he kept following him. His answer had been simple: because Basilov was stronger. And now, just when all hope seems lost, Basilov towers over the vampire. Steam hisses off Basilov's body as his fury rises, veins bursting across his face, the very air cracking around him. The vampire flinches back on instinct, sensing the shift. Basilov's frame leaner now, his presence sharpened. Scowling, the creature jeers that he must have stood only to die, clutching at his ruined shoulder before letting out a roar. Before their eyes, the stump begins to twist and bulge, even the gaping spear wound knitting shut. Kirillov warns him in alarm. The beast can regenerate, but Basilov doesn't care. The arm finishes warping into a jagged blade, the vampire sneering if Basilov can still act so arrogant once his mouth is split open. He admits he didn't know he could heal so instantly either. And now he understands Morel's words. Superhumans exist only to draw out the true strength of Inhumans. With that revelation, he explodes into motion, leaping from wall to wall in blinding arcs of speed. Columns shatter in his wake until he kicks off a pillar and hurtles forward, blade arm outstretched, driving straight for Basilov's skull. Basilov had once explained his ability, and the name alone, rapid digestive progress, was enough to make Kirillov laugh. Basilov bristled at the mockery, but confirmed it was real. As his digestion speeds up, every part of his being sharpens, vision, muscle, strength, all rising dramatically. Kirillov admitted it was impressive, as people usually assume more weight equals more power. In Basilov's case, it's the opposite. The more he burns away, the stronger he gets. But Kirillov quickly caught the flaw. Basilov couldn't trigger the ability at will. He needed a medium, an opponent. Only by taking blows, by being pushed back, could his body awaken. Basilov had grudgingly confirmed it. In his normal state, he could handle most battles, and even with little weight shed, his combat efficiency surged. Yet he'd never once been driven to his true limit. Never reached the bottom of his reserves. Not yet. The blade arm never lands. Basilov catches it in one hand and, almost amused, commends the vampire for being the first to push him this far. His reward is a single savage punch that caves the creature's face in, blasting it across the floor and into a pillar, stone collapsing in a cloud of dust. Basilov strides forward, slow and unyielding, as the vampire slumps against the rubble. Realizing death is closing in, it forces its wings back into place and shoots toward the ceiling like a black comet, the air splitting in his wake. But in a split second, Basilov rockets from the ground, scaling the 4 stories in an instant, already beside it, aura flaring as he snarls for it to die, and drives a crushing blow into its skull. The vampire is hammered straight down, slamming into the floor with a shockwave that rattles the entire sanctuary, forcing even Kirillov on the second level to brace himself. Basilov descends after it, both arms raised high, and brings them down in a final strike. The impact detonates in a blinding flash, the sound so thunderous it can be heard for miles. Concrete heaves upward in ripples, pillars trembling as rubble rains down. Cracks split through the cathedral's walls, the whole structure groaning in collapse. Kirillov urges Basilov to move before the roof caves in, but Basilov only stands over the vampire's body, face cloaked in shadow. Then, together, they burst through the front doors into the snowy tundra, the light of dawn washing over them as the cathedral crashes down behind in a roar of stone and dust. Basilov exhales, shoulders loosening, and mutters he's hungry. Time to eat. Deep within an unknown place, the air hums with unease. A figure stirs, as if sensing something. Pan narrows his gaze, asking what troubles him. The figure answers bluntly, "Graeb is dead." The words ripple through the chamber, drawing silence from the Inhumans present. Pan lowers his head, sorrow flickering across his face. He mutters that Graeb must have rushed into a fight with another Inhuman, even after being told to hold back and search for Ophir's corpse. That foolish bat. He asks if this loss will disturb their plans. The figure answers without hesitation. None at all. A dim light catches his face, grotesque and twisted. It is their leader, Murel. Beneath calm skies and crowded cities, the age of Inhumans has only just begun. Hit like and subscribe before Inhumans eat us all. Thank you for watching.